Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about dry suits and what kind of decisions you need to make when buying a dry suit. There's so many options, so I brought in Mike from Dive Right In Scuba to help you understand what you need to consider when buying a dry suit. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, Torben. We're here to make sure people get fit into the right suit so they can have some dry dives.
Sounds really good. I'm going to do a quick introduction of you, Mike, because I think you are the person in the US who sells the most dry suits. Am I right on that?
We do. Yeah, we sell a lot with all the manufacturers. We're not focused on just one or two brands here. We carry them all, and we are a top seller, typically top one or three, mostly one and two with all of them. We just crank out a lot of suits. We help a lot of people get into the right suit for them, which is the most important. There's a lot of choice, and people don't always know what's going to be best for them. And that's where we come in to, by having all that choice, really give them the plethora of options, but help whittle it down to make sure they get in the suit that's going to be best for them tomorrow, as well as in 1 and 10 years down the line of their diving.
That sounds really good. And actually making that decision that you get a product that fits you. So you're the biggest retailer, you're the biggest in stock, and you also have, own in-house repairs of dry suits. And this is why you're also offering lifetime warranties on both leaks and replacements of seals and zippers. We're going to talk more about that later. And in this video, we're going to cover all the basics of what you need to consider. We're going to talk about the materials. We're going to talk about the fit. We're going to talk about seals, wrist boots, all of the things that you could consider when buying a dry suit. So let's just dive straight into it. Why should a diver consider a dry suit over a wetsuit?
I mean, the biggest reason is comfort. I remember when I first started diving, I was like, I can do that dive in a wetsuit, and you can. But once you get into that dry suit and you realize how much easier it is to get on and off instead of a wet, cold wetsuit, once you realize how much warmer you are, how much more comfortable you are in the water, it just changes everything. Even when you get out of the water after the dive, you're not driving back on the dive boat, shivering a little bit. You're warm, you're dry, you're ready to go.
Yeah, well, that's a big thing. Is there any temperatures where dry suits doesn't make any sense anymore? Like, where's that change?
I mean, it really depends on how long you're in the water, right? Our body is 98 degrees, and even 80-degree water is 18 degrees less than our body temperature. So at some point in time, you're gonna get cold. So if you're doing really long dives, if you're in the water repetitively, time after time after time, like those are some reasons to have a dry suit even in warmer water. May not always seem necessary. And it probably isn't, but it depends on the tool that you need for that day and what you're diving. So it's hard to really say that any water temperature isn't good. It just depends on how long you're going to be in it.
There's a lot of benefits to it. Even though I love being in a small, rash guard when it's really warm outside and it's tropical diving, as soon as the water starts getting colder, even a really good wetsuit will at some point make you cold. And for a dry suit, it's just not the case. So that's really nice.
If you're doing repetitive research diving or something like that, like I said, it's a tool. You know what I mean? Yep. And it definitely has its range where it is always the best tool in the bag, but it is still a tool sometimes even in warmer water that you can probably go to, but probably not as often.
So what's the first question you ask a diver coming into your store who's about to buy a dry suit?
The biggest thing is, why do you think you need one? So we can try to figure out, what are you going to use it for? Are you on a fire department, where you're going to be going into cars where there's gas and oil? Are you the guy going to Bali that, wants to use it in really warm climate and might need a breathable suit or something lighter weight? Are you the guy, local to us that's going, 150 feet, or deeper on Lake Michigan, and needs cold water gear and possibly a heater pack? So, just figuring out where they're wanting to go, next week with their diving and also over the next coming years, so we can make sure that suit is future-proof.
So you could actually say the first question someone should ask themselves before actually going to a store or before looking into a dry suit is, where am I going to be diving it? So they actually have that question aligned or that answer aligned before they go into the store.
Correct.
So a few of the things that I've been looking into when looking at dry suits, or at least when you're looking at it online, there's a bunch of things, but I think the first thing that comes into mind is actually the material. Am I going to do a neoprene or a trilaminate, or what kind of suit am I going to buy? And then my question to you would be, where do I find the answer to this question? Which suit fits which needs?
Yeah, that's a good question. There is a handful of different materials, and some offer more flexibility, some offer more durability, some give you more inherent warmth, like neoprene. A lot of people think that neoprene leaks because we're used to being in a wetsuit and getting wet. But
Yeah.
neoprene is rubber. It gets in at the neck, it gets in at the zipper, it gets in with all the holes they put in when they sew it together. So neoprene dry suits can actually be very comfortable. They can be a little bit more forgiving on the fit, but they're definitely a lot warmer. But they do have some downsides too, is you typically need some more lead to dive them. They're a little bit heavier. They take a little bit longer to dry. So again, pros and cons, but there's commercial divers that want a thicker suit, something that can take more abuse, something that can bump a nail 100 times and not cause a leak, or a screw or a bolt head, and something that's quick and easy to get in and out of. There's some suits that I'm sure you've dove some, like the Fusion, that take a little bit more time to get into, but they're a lot more streamlined and everything when you're diving them, but it takes a little bit longer to get into. And then you can go to regular Trilam suits, which are a little bit easier to get into, but they're also going to be a little bit bulkier, because unlike a neoprene suit that can stretch when you bend your arm, a Trilam suit doesn't have any stretch. So it's got to be a little bit baggier all around so that you can bend at the arm, at the leg, at the hip, and do different movements. So you can get different cuts of those as well that can limit your mobility, like a cave cut. There's also bilam material or Kevlar or breathable. So there's a whole host of them. But back to your question on where to get that help, that's where coming to us as the experts, that's kind of a big thing as we whittle down some of those questions and explain a lot more in depth than I'm doing now about those materials, about those choices and everything.
Neoprene is warmer and it's definitely more forgiving for scratches. But if you're traveling with your suit, where's the Trilaminate becomes a really big advantage to that, because it's lighter.
Yep.
Yeah. And how important is a proper dry suit fit? Do I need a off the rack? Do I need a custom suit? Where's that going to take me?
No, that's another very big question. And I'll be honest with you, to me, fit is the most important. It is the biggest thing about a dry suit, is having a good fit. The nice thing is not everybody needs a custom. A lot of the manufacturers, they don't just make 6 sizes. They have a plethora of sizes for you to fit into. And most of the suits are a little bit forgiving. You're not even going to notice that it might be a little bit too big on you. But if it's too small and it hinders your stretching, your mobility, your ability to reach your valves or anything like that, that can be bad. It can be uncomfortable. Or if you try to step up because you want to dive colder water, you need a thicker undergarment or something like that, it might not fit the same. So no, fit is very, very important. But again, the nice thing is when you take measurements the right way, you take your time getting those measurements, it allows us to get you the right fit. And sometimes that is coming back and saying, hey, we might need to do some minor modifications on this suit because a large, tall fits you, but you got short arms like a T-Rex. So we gotta dial that back a little bit just in the arms, but everything else fits you. Or it might just be that you've got an odd shape and hey, we may need to do a full custom everywhere else, but really nailing those measurements allows us to figure out the exact fit that you would need for your suit.
So if you are picking an off the rack, you'd always advise people. So if you're looking at all the sizes and everything matches up except for, one, then go the largest size of whatever is on that. And I can also see that, like, if you're in a wetsuit, it can be a bit more forgiving. If you have a one size smaller and something, you can still move it because it's a bit stretchy. Whereas definitely a Trilam, it won't stretch, it won't move, so you'll just be stuck in that position. Is that correct?
Yeah, but you don't want to go too big, right? We have a lot of people that are like, oh, I bought this 4XL suit and I'm an XL person, but it was such a good deal. Can you fix it? It's like, no. Please send it back. We need to get you into something that's a lot closer. So a lot of times the best thing to do is when you're looking at these size charts is to measure yourself or with our input, and we'll circle exactly all their measurements on this chart and see which column has the most circles. And then we can kind of adapt from there as needed to really, like I said, dial in the best fit.
Another thing that, one of the questions, at least if you start looking more into the suit, or if you ever looked at one of these online forums where you're buying one, a lot of questions start popping up, and one of them is the seals. So there's so many types of seals, neck seals, wrist seals, but for a neck seal, I see latex, neoprene, silicone, and then variations of that. Which different seals should I choose as a diver?
It's interesting. It's always, and again, it depends on the person diving and what they're really into also. Neoprene seals are going to be warmer. They're going to be a little bit stretchier. They're going to be more comfortable. It's not going to be as tight on your neck, even though it is, because it has more of that give. So it's a lot more comfortable, but because it's not as tight, because it is a little bit thicker, when you move certain ways, depending on your build and your neck, you can see sometimes certain channels will open up or things that can cause water to get in. So it might not be as dry on everybody. Silicone, another great alternative. When you go with silicone, you're typically going to have a replaceable seal system on that suit because you can't glue silicone to any of the materials. It just doesn't stick. So that gives you the cool benefit of if you rip a seal, you can change it out while you're on the dive boat or at the beach doing your shore diving, and you don't have to sit out those dives. You can quickly change it and be off and running again. It's going to be a lot tighter than neoprene, but a lot more comfortable because it's still really stretchy over latex. Silicone is probably the most sought after one right now. Latex is going to be a little bit harder. Some people have a latex allergy. It fits really good. It's really tight and everything like that, but it's stretchy, but not nearly as stretchy as silicone. So it can be a little bit harder to fit. You may need to trim those seals a little bit and everything like that, but it is a cheaper alternative because you don't have to also have that seal system on the suit. And they still work great. It's just, you might fight it a little bit harder than silicone.
I love the replacement of the quick neck systems, especially if you're going anywhere longer trips, that you can actually replace it or have a spare. So if you rip it, you can still be diving. Whereas, if you're on a liveaboard, you tear your seal on day 2, you're either going to be sitting out the dive, so you're going to be, using a rental wetsuit. So now we talked about how they work. How long will a seal last? Do I need to consider anything in terms of that when I'm ordering, or is that, standard for all of them? They will last.
It's another great question. I mean, we have some people that as they're cutting their seals, they make a mistake of stretching that seal, and then as soon as they touch it with scissors, it rips. When something is taut and you add a sharp object, it usually tears. So anybody watching, when you're cutting those seals, don't have it too tight, right?
Not around the tank?
No, never around a tank. 4-inch PVC works great for a neck. 2-inch PVC works fantastic for your wrist. So if you're trimming those, the best way to do it is not even scissors, because every time you open a scissors, you kind of can create a jagged edge in that cut. So we recommend a brand new razor blade, turn that seal inside out. There's guidelines, put it on 2 or 4-inch PVC, stick it in deep and just rotate it right around. You have a super clean cut that looks like it's factory done. Latex can sometimes fail after a year or 2 on its own, or it can last 20 years. The manufacturers of the seals don't know if that is shampoo, detergents, if it's suntan lotion that can sometimes cause that to get rubbery and fail. Silicone doesn't have that issue. Silicone can rip sometimes a little bit easier because it is so stretchy. We don't always pull it over our head. We just pull it down, and sometimes we stretch it too far and that can rip. Same thing with neoprene. Is a lot of people will kind of use their fingernails to open up that seal, and then those nails are cutting right into that neoprene, and that can cause it to fail prematurely as well.
What about warmth in terms of that? Neoprene versus silicone, at least, or latex as well. Is there any difference in that if you dive in really cold water?
Definitely. And it's something that people probably don't talk about enough. Neoprene is definitely a lot warmer, right? Because it's thicker. And when you've got blood going to your extremities, your hands, it comes through your wrist, where that wrist seal would be, obviously to your brain, through your neck and everything like that. Having that extra warmth will keep your head a lot warmer, keep your hands a lot warmer as well, just because you're keeping that blood warm. Now, having good dry gloves can do that as well. Or some undergarments now for the neck will have a higher neck that you want to make sure you get tucked into that seal to try to bring some of that warmth back. But neoprene, hands down, is always going to be the warmest. So if you're doing stuff in the Arctic or anything like that, it's a great choice.
What about cuffs, seals on your wrists? Is that the same? What should people choose on that?
So again, for me personally, I like silicone or latex there. Neoprene is still going to be warmer and more comfortable. So it depends on the person. I don't think you really have a bad thing here. The most important thing is going to be how you take it off. Any of those seals, if we are taking them off, we want to make sure we use our fingers to pull it away and not kind of cup our fingers in and use our nails. Those nails are the most devastating thing for any of these suits, even wetsuits, to be honest with you. We see a lot of people when they're taking off their wetsuit, they're grabbing it with those nails and they get all these little lines and marks and their nail marks, and they don't really understand where it's coming from until you tell them. So yeah, if you can, just grab it with your fingertip, the inside, not the edges where your nails are. And any of the seals will last a long time.
Another question that people have or will be asked when looking at the Drysuit online is the zippers. There's front zippers, there's back zippers, there's plastic, there's brass zippers. What should I choose as a diver? What's the best for different scenarios?
Absolutely. So if we start with front and back zipper, front zipper, you're going to be able to get in and out of it yourself. You don't need somebody else. Back zipper, you've got to have somebody else there to zip you up. There are some that you can reach. It's not always practical though, so best to have your buddy do that. The difference though, the benefit of a back zip suit is it can be a tighter fit, because on a front zip, with how that zipper is, they have what's called a telescoping torso. We need more material in the length of the suit so we can duck and get our head into it, right, to put it on. And that's called a telescoping torso. So there's more material, there's more fabric. It's usually folded, it's out of the way. But that is something that a back zip doesn't have, because you're climbing into it like a sleeping bag. Most people prefer that front entry though, but a back zip suit does have some benefits. As far as the materials of the zippers, the plastic versus metal, plastic's kind of the new guy on the field. And by new, I'm talking 10, 12 years. So they're not that new. They're pretty tried and trusted. They are more flexible. They are easier to pull. They don't need to be waxed as much. With a metal zipper, when it is closed, if we were to bend it, we can bend it too far and it'll break permanently. If we do that with a plastic zipper, the teeth won't really break, but the knuckles will separate. And all we've got to do is run that zipper up and down again, and they connect and everything's fine. So they can be a little bit more durable in some situations. My preference, I really like plastic. You can't really go wrong with metal, but once you go plastic, it pulls so much easier. It's so much cleaner. With both of them, no matter what you go with, don't be afraid when you're closing it. Give it a couple more tugs at the bottom. So many people don't, and that zipper is open. You can't really even see it, but that little fraction of an inch that zipper is still open will cause a mega leak. You will get out of the water. You will be wet. You will have ankles that are full of water, and that will be because you didn't close your zipper.
What about, you mentioned that dry glove systems. What's the advantage of that? Who should choose that?
That is my favorite addition ever to a suit. Wearing wet gloves, again, always fine. Once I got into a dry suit, no big deal. My gosh, Torben, once I went with dry gloves, whole different game. Putting on wetsuit gloves when they're wet, even when they're dry, is not always easy, even the best gloves, and then even taking them off. And your hands do start to get cold, and then you got to put them on again, the next dive, and you're just, dry gloves, amazing.
I still remember that pain in, the fingertips when you have really cold hands and you have to do something which might just be actually taking your gloves off after the dive, but it's just painful because the hands are just so cold and wet and
Yep. So what I always recommend, though, another little tip for that is always have a spare set of gloves in case you put a little rip or a nick in one. It is very easy to change out those dry gloves later. But one thing that a lot of people forget is to have another set of dry suit liners. So have another warm glove, which is, for those that don't know, when you're wearing dry gloves, you're also wearing another glove underneath it to keep your hand warm. Have a spare set of those too, because sometimes even when you're taking your gloves off, they get wet, or if you didn't put it on right and you have a leak, at least you have a spare, so on your next dive, you got nice warm hands.
What about pressure changes? I've seen a lot of tips on how to equalize the pressure. What's your go-to take on that?
Yeah, so some people will put straws in there. The dry glove systems come with little rubber straws and things like that you can put in there. Personally, for me, the thing that I've used all the time and I never lose is the stirrup for the thumb strap. All undergarments have a little thumb loop.
Yep.
And most people will take that off and tuck it back in. I take it off and don't tuck it in. And the little break in the seal lets that water transfer. Anytime I've used the straws or any other system, I always forget it's there. I take everything off. When I go dive the next time, they're gone because they're on the floor of the dive boat or whatever. And sometimes, depending on the dry glove, sometimes you can feed a little bit of that into the seal too. You just need that seal broken a little bit. Nothing that needs to be a finger or anything like that, but just enough to change that pressure, because as you go deeper and that pressure increases, it will hurt your fingers.
So for anyone who's not familiar with this, if you have dry gloves on there, of course, basically you have a seal on your wrist and then you have the dry gloves. So there's going to be pressure on the outside squeezing your fingers. And for this suit, we equalize it by adding more air in, and you want a way to put air in your gloves as well. And that's where you break that small seal or open up that small seal. That's what we're talking about now.
Yep. And it brings some warmth to it too, having a little bit of air in there as well.
True. Yeah, especially because the fingers do get colder faster than most other parts of your body as well, right? Last, in terms of this, or at least that I think are related to that, is my feet. You know, I want to have them nice and warm, and there's a few different options. And I think it gets quite confusing for a lot of people of which boots to choose. There's, you know, rock boots, there's tech boots, there's built-in boots. What kind of boot options should I pick as a diver?
Again, that's really going to depend how you're diving. If I'm boat diving, I don't need a big rock boot or anything. I can probably go with a built-in boot that has less of a sole, and that's going to be more comfortable. But if I were to take that same suit and go to a rock quarry or something where I've got to walk on gravel or rocks, it's really going to be pretty painful. I might prefer a suit that has a sock and a built or a separate rock boot just to get a little bit more of a sole. So it really just depends on what you're doing and how you're going to use that suit. There's also something that we got to remember, which is efficiency and just ease. Sometimes it's easier to have the boot built into the suit so you didn't have to forget one of them at home. Or there's nothing worse than telling the guy in 90 degrees that has his undergarment on, his suit on, everything, that he forgot to put his boots on. He's got to somehow try to bend over and get all this stuff on, and he's already sweating and everything.
How do you know how to make the choice? So if you're diving different places, can you try them on? What's your take on that?
You can. A lot of suits now are just coming with them built in instead of the sock, but you can always change it out later if you need to. I think the biggest thing is just know what you're getting into, kind of like we just talked about, how you're going to dive the most. If it's 80% rocks, 20% on boats, probably go with a separate rock boot. If it's 80% boats or beach, 20% rocks, go with something built in. Unless that you're a creature of comfort and you're like, no, I want the easy button. I'll deal with that minute of pain walking to my destination or whatever it may be. It's just being able to have it articulated like we just kind of did so people can make that decision for themselves.
As you're saying, you can still go out on rocks with built-in boots. It's not like they will break instantly because there is insulation on them, there is padding on them. They have a nice grip on your feet as well. So it's not that you can't do it, it's just not as comfortable, right?
Correct. And they all work the same, so it's still going to work for you.
Another thing that people will be asked when buying a suit is, do you want pockets? Do you have any take on that? What's the go-to on that?
I mean, having a nice pocket is nice. Even if you're not going to use it, you're never going to not have something to put in the pockets. You may not have it day one, you know, if you're not a tech diver or anything like that, but you're always going to find something, whether it's a shark tooth or a shell that you decide you want to take home with you, whether it's your buddy passing a wet note to you that you need to take, or if it's all your own stuff, your own reel, your own spare mask, your own wet notes, all that other stuff. Having good pockets do make it nice, but not everybody needs them. You know, some recreational divers don't want that added bulk. They don't want that extra weight. So again, it really just depends on the person, on their need and what their goals are for their dives.
What about P-valves? Is that a thing you should consider? Peeing in a dry suit is not as easy as in a wetsuit. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, and so again, you know, it really comes back to how you're going to use it. You know, if you're doing hour-long dives and you're comfortable with going to the bathroom before your dive, you know, you want to stay hydrated. So going to the bathroom and diving is a thing. But not everybody likes to wear a condom catheter, and this is okay for men and women. There are options for both of them. But if you do have to go to the bathroom, having that hooked up and ready to go is fantastic because you're not going to have to get wet in your suit like a wetsuit. You're kind of, you know, purging it from the suit through this P valve. And you can stay comfortable instead of, you know, wanting to end that dive early to go back up and go to the bathroom the right way.
A dry suit is basically just a suit that will keep you dry. Now, we covered a lot of things in a dry suit, but the basics of it will keep you dry. But a lot of, well, depending if you go with a neoprene, but a Trilaminate won't keep you warm. So you do the undergarments. Are there anything to consider? You say get a good dry, undergarment, but what specifies a good undergarment? Should it be really thick? Should it? What's the situation there?
Depends where you're diving, you know, on how thick of an undergarment you need. Being able to layer up is always a good thing because, you know, sometimes you may not get the thickest undergarment that you think you need. And one undergarment isn't good for everything. Having a thick one isn't going to help you when the water's warmer. Having a thin one isn't going to help you when the water's colder. So having something that allows you to kind of layer up makes it a lot more comfortable. Me personally, I like fleece undergarments. I think the fleeces have come a long way in their use. Loft is another one. How the loft undergarments work is there is just a lot of layers in here. And when you're in the water, those layers are squished. So they're not really effective. So you've got to add a little bit more air to the loft undergarments for them to be really effective. That gives you a bigger air bubble in the suit. I personally am not always a fan of that. Some really like them because they can be extremely warm undergarments. Me personally, I kind of like more streamlined, and the fleece really does a really good job for my body. It keeps it more tight on your body when you're wearing it as well, instead of having, bagginess from a bigger undergarment. And it allows you to layer. Any of them allow you to layer up if needed. You can add another vest to keep your core warm. And keeping that core warm is what's going to keep all your extremities warm as well. But really fit. Try it on. And try it on with your dry suit. That is also very important because, you've got to be able to have enough room in that dry suit, depending on the fit, for that undergarment to work properly.
Is that something to consider when you're choosing the fit, if you're going to be diving extreme colds or no cold at all, in terms of the sizing of the dry suit, if you need like a bigger undergarment underneath?
And that depends on the manufacturer, right? So some of them have already accounted for that where you don't need to. Other ones may not. Sometimes when you're doing a custom suit, they will say, where are we diving? What kind of undergarment are we using? And they want to know, is it going to be something that's a thicker loft undergarment or something that's thinner like a fleece undergarment, so they can build the suit appropriately?
If I'm just getting my dry suit, can I just use my ski underwear, my long johns and so on underneath, or is there anything special with the undergarments related to diving that means I can't use it? What's the take on that?
A lot of times it can be very similar stuff. Long johns, cotton is horrible. Even wearing a t-shirt under a really nice undergarment is bad because cotton is not a good insulator. It'll actually store your sweat, hold it against your body, and make you colder faster. So you want something that's going to wick and keep things away from you. Some of the nice things that the undergarments have for dive, they are cut differently to go with dry suits. They will have different holes for P-valves, some of the thumb loops, different neck heights to keep your neck warm like we talked about. So they are built more for the environment. Could you adapt something else? Yes. It's not going to be perfect though. And a lot of times those things are the same price anyway.
Now, you just mentioned it. Lifetime warranty. What does that mean for you guys?
So we have the industry first and only warranty that we offer on top of people that buy a suit from us. Just by buying a suit from us, you get our lifetime free leak test. So anytime if you think you're having an issue, send us a suit. We will check it out for free and let you know what's going on with it. We also offer 2 other levels of our warranty, our premium and our platinum. Our premium warranty is pretty cool. If you do get a hole like you were talking about, if you are running through barbed wire to get to your fence and you put a hole in it, if you rip or tear your seals, we take care of that. You send us a suit, we repair it at no charge to you and send it right back to you. If you've got a replaceable seal system, we send you an extra neck seal and an extra wrist. So if that happens, you've already got a backup. Let us know. We'll send you another one when you tear one. Our platinum warranty just goes another couple levels further, and it includes the zipper. So if you damage that zipper, if you step on it, if you do pull it the wrong way and a tooth pops off, you're covered. We take care of that. And that's for the life of the suit. So it'll last a long time. It's not a lifetime warranty. I mean, I guess it is. But at some point in time, the suit will fail. We're not covering that your suit will never die. There at some point in time, the fabric may not be usable anymore or things like that, and we can't use it. We've never come across that yet, but I always do tell people at some point in time, it may die.
The premium warranty as well is something that we're going to be giving to DIVEIN readers as well. When you're buying a suit and you're mentioning that you saw it here at DIVEIN, or if you go through our form on divein.com, you can get a free premium warranty as well to your suit.
Yep. And that, like I said, that covers if you put a hole in it on purpose or an accident, not that people are going to go shoot up their suit, but if something happens to it, you're covered. If there's something wrong with the seals, you're covered. And Torben, the cool thing is if they want that platinum warranty, they can just pay that price difference and they can add that on too.
That's a nice thing. I think it takes a lot of the concerns people have about the dry suit. Is it going to fail straight away?
And we do all those repairs in-house. They're not getting sent anywhere. We've got a full repair center. So that's how we can offer something like that for our customers and your viewers. So it's really cool.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. I want to talk a bit about the budgets of a dry suit. How much money should I spend on a dry suit? We talked a bunch about a lot of features, but how much money do I really need to spend on a dry suit?
That depends on you, Torben. There is a lot of different things that come with fit and finish. And some people want more of that Cadillac, more of that higher end polished look. That costs more money. There's more stitching. There's more materials. There's different materials. Some want something that's going to keep them dry. They don't care as much about the fit. They're okay with it being a little bit baggier and not as formed of a cut with less panels. I'm sorry, more panels on a better cut, less panels on a baggier cut. So it really depends on the person. But to get everything, if you can budget around $2,000, $2,500, you'll be in a really good place. Sometimes you've got to go up a little bit higher to get that custom suit if you do fall into that category of needing it. There's always tons of deals that we've got out there too. We actually buy a lot in bulk from manufacturers. As some suits go discontinued, or we'll do buybacks when they take a suit that they mismade, we'll buy that from them at a discount so you can get a high level suit at a discounted price also. And we've always got a lot of that stuff in stock. So as we start figuring out fit and size for each person, we can make some of these suggestions to get you a higher level suit at a value driven price.
Keep an eye on the website, see which suits is available, or just, call. All right, we will have a form as well in Dive In where we can actually get in contact with you, or you will have your team reach out to people. So if you're looking for a suit, definitely follow the link in the description and fill out that form with some of the questions that we've been covering here. But Mike and his team will also reach out to you, and they'll go through that whole process. So you don't have to be alone on making these decisions. So if you're local in the Chicago area, drop by Mike's store. But if you're anywhere else, go in there and have a call with the staff from Dive Right In Scuba and actually let them help you make the right decisions for your needs. Because as this is going to be a long video, there's a lot of things to consider when buying a suit. So my best advice would actually be to call up or to fill out the form and then talk to the people at Dive Right In Scuba, because they know they are the biggest retailers of dry suits in the US, and they meet people like you every day that wants a new dry suit.
And no matter how you reach out to us, mention Dive In. You want that premium warranty.
Mike, thank you so much for joining in and helping everybody here understand more of the dry suits and the choices that they make in that.
Anytime. Remember, the goal is to be dry. If your suit is not dry, let's get it dry again.
Or otherwise, you just picked a wetsuit that morning and
an expensive wetsuit.